What villain was terrifying because they were right? Story 1. Dr. Zaius from Planet of the Apes. The entire original series does a really good job, in my opinion, making the villains right, but also the harbingers of their own downfall. But Dr. Zaius is my personal favorite. Dr. Zaius in Beneath the Planet of the Apes has this line which sums up his ideology to a T, paraphrasing as it's been a hot minute. Help you? Why should I help you? Man is evil, capable of nothing but destruction. And the best part is, while, yes, by refusing to help George, he leads to the world being destroyed, he wasn't even wrong. He wasn't ever wrong. The end of the first movie has George learn that mankind caused a nuclear apocalypse whilst he was out in outer space, leaving the other apes to evolve in a more or less a wasteland. And the second movie ends with George activating nukes underground in a last-ditch Hail Mary and blowing Earth up. While yes, it could have been avoided if Zaius just helped George, why should he have? Everything from both the apes' religious beliefs and their knowledge of history shows mankind to be an evil, destructive species. And while yes, we're also doing good, let's be honest, it's always been our destructive efforts that have led to more lasting impacts on the world. And the last thing Dr. Zaius experienced was just confirmation of his belief as a human, destroying not only himself, not only Dr. Zaius, but literally the entire planet. I don't know if any of you know, but this was also written, the first movie at least I know of, that was written by Rod Serling, who created The Twilight Zone. He was very much known for those kind of like dark and deep kind of stories that bordered on sci-fi. They're very good. Story 2. Anthony Dresden from The Expanse. Season 1 and 2, Book 1 spoilers below. About 300 years in the future, a science team discovers on Phoebe, a moon of Saturn that orbits in retrograde, the first evidence of extraterrestrial intelligent life in the form of a dormant compound that must consume biomass to grow and develop into something. They keep it under wraps and quietly study it. All the evidence points to Earth being this compound's target, and we just got lucky over 1 billion years ago that Saturn's gravity, well, managed to capture Phoebe on its way to Earth. It must have been a weapon. What if whoever sent it comes back to finish the job? The only way to prepare and protect humanity is to understand this thing. It needs to be fed complex life in a controlled setting that could be sterilized and terminated before things get out of hand. So Dresden, with the backing of a powerful technology company, decides to turn the colonized asteroid Eros into this petri dish. Eros just happens to be inhabited by over 100,000 humans who have no say in the matter. But what's 100,000 people compared to the 40-plus billion of humanity across the solar system? Genghis Khan killed thousands times more in his time. As a percentage of the human population unalived from his era, Eros would be a rounding error by comparison. Dresden gets caught after the Eros experiment is uncovered, and some vigilantes find his observation outpost to confront him. They expect to find a murderous psychopath, except by the time he finishes explaining his reasoning for the experiment, to some of them he starts making sense. Just watch the show and thank me later. Ooh, I hate that this was spoiled. I'm actually in the middle of watching at least the first series of The Expanse. Been wanting to watch it for quite a while, so see, here's some of the hazards of voicing channels like this. Story 3. Screenslaver from The Incredibles 2. The monologue given during that movie regularly rings in my head. I'm sure the creepy bass robotic voice doesn't help either. The screenslaver interrupts this program for an important announcement. Don't bother watching the rest. Elastigirl doesn't save the day. She only postpones her defeat. And while she postpones her defeat, you eat chips and watch her invert problems that you're too lazy to deal with. Superheroes are part of a brainless desire to replace true experience with simulation. You don't talk, you watch TV shows, you watch talk shows. You don't play games. You watch game shows. Travel, relationships, risk. Every meaningful experience must be packaged and delivered to you to watch at a distance so that you can remain ever sheltered, ever passive, ever ravenous consumers who can't free themselves to rise from their couches to break a sweat, never anticipate new life. You want superheroes to protect you and make yourselves ever more powerless in the process. Well, you tell yourselves you're being looked after, that you're inches from being served and your rights are being upheld, so that the system can keep stealing from you, smiling at you all the while. Go ahead. Send your supers to stop me. Grab your snacks, watch your screens, and see what happens. You are no longer in control. I am. Too long didn't read? You think everything will be okay, and while you remain distracted, the powers that be will continue to steal from you. There is some truth to that, but my issue with that was always the name screenslaver. This was supposed to take place in like the 50s, I think late 50s, early 60s. This was before computers, and this was before the idea of having a screensaver active to keep your screen from going dead was a thing. I always thought the name screenslaver, who was going to get that in the 50s and 60s? Nobody. We, as the audience, might get it. Even some people might get it, but not everybody. Story 4. The Reapers from Mass Effect in the original BioWare ending before EA changed it. All they were trying to do was stop advanced races from using so much dark matter that they wiped out all life in the galaxy before other races were allowed to come along. If it wasn't for them, humanity wouldn't just not exist, but every species in the entire cycle, every species in every cycle, everyone would have passed away as the stars went out. This horrific, fast, heat-unaliving event over the course of a few thousand years. Except a small group of Leviathans, in the early days of the universe, realized what was going to happen and sacrificed their entire civilization to save all future life in the galaxy. And when Shepard destroys their ships in the third one, every one of those ships is a museum, a living record of every previous civilization, and they're destroying the only thing that was able to be left from them. To fight the Reapers is to fight against everyone who has ever lived and everyone who ever will live. The Reapers don't just have a point. They've saved more lives than we can even fathom. Their only flaw is that they were never able to find a solution that was better than wiping out civilization every few thousand years and preserving what they could find. Story 5. Otto from WALL-E. It was one of the only almost perfectly executed AI villains. He never really talks unless needed because he wasn't programmed to. No malicious motives, does everything efficiently. He's only bad because he follows his programming, protects the humans, and doesn't let them back to Earth. Not out of malicious intent, but it was what he was programmed to do. And his directive isn't even incorrect. WALL-E finding that plant was like finding a 4-leaf clover in a field of grain. The planet was nowhere near habitable, and they barely know how to stand when they get back. In reality, you know nobody on that axiom is going to make it very far. Edit. Some of you missed the main point of the original post and stated arguments on how humans could survive. Remember, me thinking they wouldn't make it far alone is only any theory. And I'm not saying it's 100% truth, but I'm kind of tired and I keep getting people saying the same thing, so I thought I would just say that so I could go to sleep and hopefully have a couple people less ticked off when I wake up than I would have had I not said that. Story 6. For all my theater nerds. Besides AIDS, Benny was the villain of the musical Rent. But was he the villain? He's a great character for sure, but I don't think he's such a mongrel. He rents out a massive apartment in New York City to his friends who have no income or credit, probably, offers them to invest in a studio to make films and write songs, pays for rehab for Mimi, and pays for the funeral for someone who literally unalived his dog. Sounds to me like a man trying to help his friends get their act together and grow up. I'll admit he's a bit of a tool for cheating on his wife, gentrification, and saying some not-so-great things to Mimi, but the villain? No way. What's really scary about it is that Benny wins, so to speak. New York is pretty much exactly what he wanted and planned. That's one of the things I regret from living on the West Coast and not the East Coast, It's not very easy to see Broadway plays out on this side of things, at least with the original cast. Only one time when I was in Vegas, I saw Spam-A-Lot, and that was when Las Vegas started experimenting with bringing over the original cast of Broadway plays here. And even then, they cut the shows down to a different runtime. Story 7. Dr. Breen from Half-Life 2. I'm honestly surprised he's not a more popular answer here. He was right. Humanity can't win against the Combine. They hold all the cards, and only by bending to every single one of their demands will humans not break. At least in his mind, he doesn't know about the G-Man. If it takes oppression of his own people, the removal of their ability to breed, the removal of free will, the terraforming of their dimension, and total subjugation into a large uncaring empire to save humanity, then so be it. Without Gordon and the G-Man's help, the rebels are only aggravating the Combine and making humans seem more of a liability to be purged than an asset to be integrated. The Combine forced the total surrender of the planet Earth in the span of 7 hours. You can't win. They've already won. Story 8. Scar. He only wanted to be king because he was a second male lion in the pride, which means he is automatically not getting much food and also beaten into submission regularly if he wants to stay in the pride. Aside from that, he isn't allowed to mate at all. Only the king gets that. Can we really blame him? Also, he tried to eat Zazu and got in trouble. He says it's natural. Then Zazu says, let's make him into a rug. Then, in freaking Hercules, he was a rug. Story 9. Red Queen, Resident Evil. I have locked down this facility to prevent a world-ending virus. Please, could you good guys pay attention and not blow holes in the doors? Except she didn't come out and say it from the beginning. I always hate it when characters say things like, you gotta trust me, or now's not the time, since that's the only way for the plot to move forward. To quote Ryan George, so the movie can happen. Yeah, this is the stuff Ryan George in the pitch meeting skits would have a field day with. In fact, I'm going to have to go back and look to see if they have the Resident Evil movies. They do all the other movies. I'm trying to think of a movie that Ryan George and Pitch Meeting haven't spoiled yet or haven't taken apart yet. Story 10. General Hummel from The Rock. I will not give that order. I will not repeat that order. I cannot give that order. What the hell is wrong with you, man? Such a great scene for both points there. Story 11. Sarah Marshall was Peter's villain. That would be terrifying to me. Losing someone you love because you've just lost your way? You've misplaced what made you, you. Cheating isn't acceptable, and no amount of whataboutism could ever make it right. She should have split with him a long time ago. They were both damaged people. The movie likes to show her as the villain, but at the time, Peter was his own villain, really. He grew through the process and came out better in the end. She didn't show the same emotional growth, but that doesn't mean she wasn't right in the beginning. Story 12. Roger, the shrink from Friends. He saw the group for what they were almost immediately, and when he called them out on it, instead of saying, you know what? He's right. We should work on ourselves and not spend the next decade bouncing from one failed relationship to the next, they badmouth him behind his back and throw cookies at him after he leaves the room. He was the hero they needed but didn't deserve. That's the thing with sitcoms, and especially sitcom comedies like these, and especially when you have something successful. You've got these characters that do have these flaws, but until everybody makes enough money, from the producers to the actors to everybody, nothing's going to get solved until the very end. You got to stretch out those neuroses just as long as you possibly can. Story 13. The Boss. Metal Gear Solid 3. I raised you. I loved you. I've given you weapons, taught you techniques, endowed you with knowledge. There is nothing more for me to give you. All that's left for you is to take my life by your own hand. One must die. One must live. No victory. No defeat. The survivor will carry on the fight. It is our destiny. The one who survives will inherit the title of boss, and the one who inherits the title of boss will face an existence of endless battle. Story 14. For sure, Vulture, aka Adam Toombs in Spider-Man Homecoming. It was not necessarily terrifying, but I still remember I'm sitting there watching that movie and I'm like, hey, this guy actually has a point. After Spider-Man and mainly Tony Stark messed him over on purpose, I was like, yeah, Adrian, curse those guys. Story 15. The Ashians in Final Fantasy XIV. They weren't trying to wipe out humanity for nothing. They were literally trying to save their civilization from the brink of extinction. Imagine, you were the last human on Earth, and you knew you could bring everyone back providing you wiped out a lesser, more annoying species, like the mosquito, for instance. It'd be a no-brainer. If the Ashians succeeded in their plan, they would have been hailed as heroes for saving the world. Story 16. Frankenstein's monster, Adam, created by a short-sighted, arrogant doctor as the first of his race, then denied the opportunity to be part of a community of his own man-made beings, or the human community. He only became monstrous after it became clear that Frankenstein would never create another of his kind, and was driven mad by his desire to punish Frankenstein's hubris. Wisdom is not giving Frankenstein a tomato salad. Story 17. Joker from The Dark Knight. Don't talk like one of them. You're not, even if you'd like to be. To them, you're just a freak, like me. They need you now, but when they don't, they'll cast you out like a leper. You see, their morals, their code, it's a bad joke, dropped at the first sign of trouble. They're only as good as the world allows them to be. I'll show you. When the chips are down, these civilized people, they'll eat each other. See, I'm not a monster. I'm just ahead of the curve. Story 18. Anybody who says Thanos is dumb. He could have just created enough resources instead of unaliving half of all life. This solution only temporarily fixes anything. Creating more resources would have increased population growth, but also unaliving half of the population would actually cause an increase in population growth as well. That's why baby boomers boomed after World War II. The real solution would have been to modify the fertility rate of humans. Of course, seeing Thanos work with Planned Parenthood would have been tonally jarring in the theaters. Story 19. Megatron, as portrayed in the IDW 1.0 series. Literally nobody here is going to understand, and pretty much all of you are going to read Megatron and think, writer robots fighting. No, I implore you to read more into his character in that entire series. He was cursed for the heinous stuff he was doing, but everything he ever said was right, and he just became politically stronger and stronger.
Please like and subscribe if you've made it this far. I hope you'll enjoy the rest of the video and have a wonderful day.
Story 20. The Matrix's Agent Smith. I tried to classify your species. I realized that you're not actually mammals. Every mammal on this planet instinctively develops a natural equilibrium with their surrounding environment, but you humans do not. You move to another area, and you multiply, until every natural resource is consumed. The only way you can survive is to spread to another area. There is another organism on this planet that follows the same pattern. Do you know what it is? A virus. Human beings are a disease, a cancer of this planet. Story 21. The Aliens from Aliens 2. Dudes living on a planet that had eggs before humans arrived, and when the greedy corp adds humans to secretly test the aliens' strength. Now, they're a menace and a group of exterminators is sent to unalive them. Sounds like typical colonialism to me. Story 22. Evelyn, screenslaver from Incredibles 2. She said superheroes keep people weak and are the reason for her parents passing away, which is technically true. If you rely on someone else to keep you safe, you'll never learn how to keep yourself safe, and if something happens to them, what will you do? Story 23. The Red Hood. Batman beats insane people up. They go to Arkham, are usually experimented on there, and come back worse. In a way, that makes Batman one of the worst perpetrators of Gotham's constant decline into savagery. The Red Hood just straight up pops them. Story 24. Magneto. He knew the hate humans had for mutants, and wasn't as blindly optimistic as Xavier. True Malcolm X of the mutant rights movement. Story 25. Poison Ivy is an environmentalist at heart, and Raj Al Ghul is a humanitarian. Both were pushed into extremism after the broken system they're trying to fix simply refused to change for so long that they decided the system itself needed to be torn down. Story 26. Dracula in Castlevania, the series. What is a man? A miserable little pile of secrets. Spot on. Quote should have made it into the show. Story 27. Bobby Heenan. Spent the 80s telling us how awful and selfish Hulk Hogan was proven absolutely correct in 1996. In hindsight, Heenan was trying to save us all from the inevitable scourge of Hollywood Hogan. Story 28. The Hamburglar was just trying to save children from childhood obesity. If Mayor McCheese and Officer Big Mac are anthropomorphic burger folk, that means Hamburglar is carrying a bag of severed heads. Story 29. Ultron browsed the internet for 30 seconds and decided humanity had to go. He could have gone straight to forums and saved himself 29.5 seconds. Story 30. Arya's parents on Pretty Little Liars. They're villainized for not letting their high school daughter date her teacher? Yeah, that relationship was just... why normalize that at all? I know why they attempted to normalize it. It was rhetorical and doesn't require an answer and was meant to display the disgust I have with the attempt. Story 31. Gore, the God Butcher. I mean, most gods were arrogant, capricious buttholes who didn't give a care about anyone. What were they doing for their followers? Thor and the Asgardians, and to a lesser extent Khonshu and the Egyptian pantheon, were the only ones being active in their worlds. All the other gods were, chilling with Zeus, planning orgies? Ah, man. Curse them all. Unalive them all. Story 32. I root for Magneto when watching the X-Men movies. He's objectively right, and Days of Future Past proves it. First class, too. They save the world and are immediately betrayed, just how Magneto thought they'd be. Story 33. Ishmael from the Wheel of Time books. Basically, time repeats itself, and there's a guy who's trying to stop time from repeating. Ishmael reasons that it's statistically impossible for the good guys to beat him every time, so the only way to win is to side with him. He's literally just right. Story 34. Chuck McGill. He was ultimately proven 100% to be correct in asserting that his brother being a lawyer would eventually ruin lives and hurt people. Granted, he was a total tool about expressing it, as well as the way he went about undermining Jimmy, but he was right. Story 35. Willem Dafoe's Green Goblin from Spider-Man. In spite of everything you've done for them, eventually, they will hate you. Dude was right about how the perception of public figures changes over time. Story 36. Well, technically not a villain, but Elliot from Mr. Robot. His views on society were spot on, besides the blatant nihilism. Story 37. Tom from Tom and Jerry. Poor guy was just trying to be a good house cat and keep mice at bay. I wonder why we all rooted for Jerry as kids. Story 38. The best villains are those that make you question your own morality and whether serving the greater good is worth the sacrifice of many lives. Story 39. Not a true villain, but Squidward. Damn, is SpongeBob an annoying neighbor? I'd hate him too. Squidward was right about adulthood, especially if you work low-wage / on-call stressful jobs. Story 40. The bears from Goldilocks and the Three Bears. She broke in, ate their food, broke some furniture, and slept in their beds. Story 41. Ken from the Bee Movie. I, too, would go absolutely berserk if a talking bee stole my girlfriend and gaslit me into thinking I was crazy. Plus, dude was allergic. Of course he wouldn't want to be around. Story 42. Maul. His last words before being captured by the Republic was, "You're all going to burn. You're all going to die. You don't know what you're doing." He tried to warn Ahsoka of Palpatine's ultimate plan, but she didn't listen. Story 43. King Kong. Not even because he was right. He was just alive, minding his own business, and blam, taken out of his home and made to be the villain without any choice. A real good example of human nature. Story 44. Count Dooku just straight up told Obi-Wan that the Sith control the Senate. I still love the fact that Dooku tells him this, and Obi-Wan knew about the clone army being set up under the Jedi's noses, and no one decided to investigate that possible connection until years into the Clone Wars. Story 45. None of you said the most terrifying one. Mojo Jojo from the Powerpuff Girls. He wanted to bring free energy and advanced technology to the people, and in one episode, he actually did. He made the world an amazing place, and then the Powerpuff Girls ruined it all. Story 46. Stevie from Wizards of Waverly Place. His entire goal was to stop families from giving up their magic to just one person in the family. Like, we're really supposed to be rooting against her? It just seems super out of character for Alex to go against that plan. Story 47. Dr. Doofenshmirtz. He was most right when he rapped, "There's a platypus controlling me underneath the table." So true. Don't we all have our own personal platypuses controlling us from under tables? Doofenshmirtz, Evil Incorporated. Story 49. The Sharks from Sharknado. Can you imagine you're just swimming around, minding your own business? Then all of a sudden, a tornado picks you up out of nowhere, drops you on land, and now you have to deal with Tara Reid? Yeah, I'd start biting people too. Story 49. Magneto is my favorite villain of all time. Every time his motives are brought to light, I get that, yeah, I kinda get it moment. Story 50. Colonel Kurtz. We train young men to drop fire on people, but their commanders won't allow them to write the F word on their airplanes because it's obscene. Story 51. The guy in Korra who wanted to end special privileges for benders. Perfectly executed the right idea fascist execution concept in Dread. Ammon the Equalist. Story 52. There is no Easter Bunny, there is no Tooth Fairy, and there is no Queen of England. Titan. Megamind 2010. Story 53. Ozymandias. He outsmarted the most powerful being in the universe and won. There actually weren't flaws in his logic or execution. Story 54. The Replicants from Blade Runner. Used as slaves and given artificially short lives. They just wanted to live and be free. Story 55. Roy Batty. What was done to him and his kind was wrong, and he had righteous anger. Story 56. Maleficent. The king was a piece of smeg and deserved everything she did to him. Story 57. Terminator 2. It's in your nature to destroy yourselves.
Please leave your story in the comments. I would love to make a video on them in the future. Also, don't forget to like and subscribe.